All right, what's good, agents? Welcome to the 11th episode of the TCG Corp podcast. At some point, we're going to change the name because I think that's why I mess up the intros every time. It's the name. It's got to be the podcast name, obviously. But it's been a minute. This episode's coming out a little later than usual. We've all had life and stuff come up. And then, of course, too many card games are flooding the market, and we all spending money unnecessarily. I say we all, but it's probably just me. But that's okay. And if you guys can't tell, Dan is back. Ooh, I got it right. I was so paranoid that he was going to be on this side when I did that. But Dan is back. How are you, good sir?
What's up, fellas? I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's been a minute. I've kept up with the last two episodes you guys did, killed it. But excited to be back in the groove and in the mix and stuff we got to talk about. And yeah, like you said, there's so many card games, dude. I'm ready and raring to go. It took a little bit of a break, but played some card games recently over the last couple weeks and definitely feeling it. So
no, it's definitely good to have you back. Yeah, an energy that was missed for sure. But yeah, no, so many card games, and I feel like card game burnout is getting to a point too where you're like, if you're trying to keep up on everything, you're like, oh, this just got spoiled about One Piece, or this just got spoiled about Lorcana. Like, it's a lot to do every day and dedicate, a chunk of your brain to. So hopefully we can take some of that burden off our listeners as well.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to play anything else until Union Arena. That's fine. And then Star Wars Unlimited came out, and me and Rick had been talking, me and Dan too, talking shit about that artwork. I'm sorry, y'all. It was rough. It was rough. At least the stuff that we saw was rough. And then I had said to Rick, you know what? I might buy it. And so he did it first, and then I couldn't not after, I guess, low-key convincing him to do so. And now we're playing another card game, and of course Union Arena is in October, and stuff is already up on pre-order in some places. And it's a problem. It's a problem. And I think burnout is a thing, but that's something we can jump into. I mean, we can start there. Then in our notes, we had talked about kind of like jumping into all the games and stuff, or we can start with some Digimon stuff. I'll let Dan decide since he's back. Oh. We'll give him power to decide our first official topic for the day.
So much pressure. I mean, yeah, we could segue right into all the card games. I feel like that's a big topic right now. Like you said, Star Wars Unlimited. Obviously, Lorcana's picking up Steam, and there's they've announced official events, and like you said, there's been One Piece leaks and Digimon's. That's another thing we'll talk about a little bit later. But like Digimon's starting for the west side of the world to catch up with Japan releases and all this. So there's just so much going on in the world of card games. Even Pokemon is coming up on their rotation. So all those players are getting ready to kind of reconfigure what their meta is going to look like. So yeah, I would say game burnout is a thing, but not so much of like burnout in the typical sense that a lot of people think of like, oh, I'm tired of playing this game, or oh man, this game is getting bored with it. It's to the fact of like you don't know which one to focus on, right? Because like we were saying, you guys started playing Star Wars Unlimited, and I've been looking at it a little bit, and yeah, the artwork is still kind of like iffy for me, but like watching the gameplay, I'm like, this game looks like a lot of fun, so it's like I want to try that. But then this new Dragon Ball set that just came out, and obviously Fusion World is out and about. The second set's about to come out with that one, and then Digimon again, like I said, so all of these games, it's like, man, you can't really realistically do all of them fully. So yeah, it's a real thing. But I think trying to look at the positive, right, as like passionate card players, it just gives us all the options in the world, right? And all the IPs that we already, like Star Wars and all these other things. It's like, we love these IPs, so we get to just play them. So.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some card games I've missed over the years. So like I wasn't playing like the Verse system. Cool, like DC versus Marvel, like that's like a classic rivalry. And now I feel spoiled by Magic, where they're just gonna like buy everybody and put Spider-Man into my game. Hell yeah. Of course I gotta make a Spider-Man every day. I wonder what's going to like get lost to the wayside, like what's gonna get stuck. Because I feel like everything has been fairly well received. Everyone's like, oh, One Piece is gonna kill, Dragon Ball is gonna kill, Digimon is blah blah blah, eating its own tail. But I don't feel like we've got to that point. I don't feel like anyone's been like a tremendous failure. So I'm like, what finally loses, or I wonder, yeah, what just ends up being the straw that breaks the camel's back? Because it's great to have all these card games, but really, how much time do you have to dedicate to playing a lot of them?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. So, I was watching somebody talk about like the big three, but really the big two, which is like Pokemon and Magic. Like, yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh treads in there into like the third slot every now and again. It's kind of a weird situation with that one. But they were talking about how a lot of people are actually seemingly coming from Magic into the other games rather than these other games kind of like stealing players from each other, like these smaller games, but they're just massive IP, because a lot of people were disgruntled with like stuff that, you know, the decisions that Magic or really Wizard of the Coast makes with that game. I'm not really well versed and experienced in that, so some of you guys in the comments can tell us like what that was like if you play Magic. But I know that, you know, shit is mad expensive. Like if you want like the collector sets, or you want a lot of these sets for like the Fallout they just did, or like Transformers, like it's not cheap to really kind of stay in the game. But all these new games that are coming out are all pretty affordable for the most part, right? Like, yes, Fusion World had its issue with you couldn't get no product within the first couple weeks, but now it's not as bad. Just buy singles. Nobody really wants to buy singles, I guess, because of the client. That's a whole other conversation. But like, it's not super expensive to get into. Same thing I would argue with Star Wars. Like, you could get the starter deck for like $30, and the starter decks are pretty playable and they're a lot of fun. One Piece is an expensive, crazy town, but like I think that's one of those where if you're in, you're in. Because it seems like it's a super dedicated fan base. Because what was it at Nats? It was, I want to say 1,400 people. Don't get me lying, but I thought it was like 1,400, some obscene number like that for them. And then of course you have Lorcana, and Lorcana is like just coming out of its weird sort of rut of not being able to find product being mad expensive. Now I see it everywhere. I see it at Targets. I see it at like my game stores, Walmart's, Best Buy. I can't escape it. GameStop. And now they're starting to do like actual events. And I'm really curious to see when, you know, Dan, you brought up people like what game do you play competitively? How people make these decisions. I know for me, it's really boiled down to like, what do I have the most fun with, and what can I commit myself to saying I'm only going to have these handful of decks, and like that's it. Because like for Lorcana, for me, I've narrowed it down to one deck, and I'm never doing anything else other than this one deck. In Dragon Ball, I've narrowed it down to 4 colors. We'll see how that goes, and so on and so forth. That being said, for you guys, specifically you, Dan, because Frolly, I don't know how many other games that you've jumped into. How do you intend to like really narrow down like either your deck choice so that your wallet doesn't hurt too much, or like change how you collect or compete in some of these games? Like, where's your head at when you think about that?
So for me, the way I look at it is my decision is based off of which property do I like the most, right? So like the ones that I go between, especially now that Star Wars, we'll include Star Wars now that it's officially out and released, right? Is Dragon Ball, Digimon, Pokemon, and Star Wars. Those are like my 4. Like, I mean, you can see back on the wall. Like, if they put out a Power Rangers game, it's over for me, right? But like, those are like my basically like those are my properties, right? And I look at it as like, okay, so I obviously know I can't commit fully and have 10, 12 decks of each, you know, IP, right? So I look at it as like, okay, well, which property do I like the most? And I just kind of tier it down that way. And you know, for me, it's always been Dragon Ball. I never really got into the game because, as we said a long time ago, it always looked intimidating to me. But once I started playing it, I fell in love with it. And then on top of that, it's like I just love, you know, that IP. So then it's like, okay, cool. With Digimon, it's kind of that same thing. So I kind of put the tier there, and then so forth and so on. So I mean, these are all interchangeable to me, by the way. Like, you know, as anybody would, you know, like Digimon was number 1 for me for a long time, and then Dragon Ball, you know, came in. I was like, oh, I actually love this game, and they kind of switched spots. Pokemon, I was a heavy competitive Pokemon player for a long time, and that was number 1. So to me, they're interchangeable. I kind of just like see like what it is, and then another big thing is where the games are at that point, right? Because like right before I came into Dragon Ball, they were in that very unhealthy meta of like, red decks just ruin the format, right? So if I was in it during then, I probably wouldn't enjoyed it so much. But I feel like Dragon Ball right now is in a point where the meta is really diverse, so like it doesn't feel stagnant or stale, right? If it ever gets to that point, I can just kind of, you know, hop ship. But yeah, I think for me, Pokemon is always going to be a game that like I always keep in my back pocket because like I've just played it for so long. But I've narrowed it down to 2 decks. Like I have 2 decks. They're like 2 of the most common ones. I can take them to any one of my locals and just kind of play, but I'm not going to do anything majorly competitive with that one. Same thing as of right now with Star Wars. You know, I
Mhm.
get the starters, kind of fool around with you guys with it, see how it is, and go from there. If Star Wars takes off and there's just, you know, I know right now there isn't one, but if there's like a crazy Anakin deck or like one of the characters that I, you know, connect with a lot, you know, we're going that route. So I think there's a couple different factors, but yeah, I think just, you know, which one you connect with the most is like what makes my decision to which one I get into.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that, like, yeah, I think when it comes to like jumping into these games, for me, that's what it is too. It's like, ah, damn, like I really like this IP. I want to have some shiny cardboard for it.
Yep.
I mean, that's what's gonna get me with Union Arena, even if I don't play it that much. Bleach cards, yes. Ichigo, yes. Give me signed cards. So you know, it's pretty absurd, I think, in that way. Frolly, has anything caught your eye? Because I know that you've been like, I feel like pretty disciplined in like your card game intake. Because I know you like a lot of things, but I feel like you stick to your like what you enjoy, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, I think you both brought up IP, and that makes the most sense, right? It's like something you enjoy, dude, you like and think is cool. Is there a deck that's available? Let's get into this game, start playing. But like, I'm glad you think I'm disciplined with cardboard, because like I wish other people held that opinion. No, for me, Magic, like being one of the more expensive, to touch on that earlier topic, that's been my sell for Digimon for a lot of people for a lot of time. I'm like, do you want a meta deck? $100, you're basically there for the most part. That's not all darts. That's not blah 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 blah. But $100, you're there. And for me, I've been very privileged in like the recent stuff. I've really focused in on Digimon for just like, what do I want to play? What colors do I want to play? And just maintaining that. And then even parting with stuff in my colors or getting some stuff from other colors where I'm like, well, I still want to play Pulsemon. Even though I don't play yellow, I'm going to build like a yellowish, have to have some yellow state. So I think it's like keeping flexible on what you pull and what you get. And like, for me, buying a Digimon deck is way different than buying a Magic deck because I'm putting time, effort, and research in the Magic one. And it's going to take me time to find it. And you can build that deck janky depending on your play group. And it can be there for a bit as you like slowly upgrade it and fix it and tune it to like who you play with. So it's all about, I think, knowing what you want, being able to get there through singles, through trades and stuff like that. Being smart about it. It sounds so easy to put into like just do the obvious good thing. But I feel like a lot of people skip or forget, or like I've bought 1 to 2 extra boxes going for something and not pulled it and been like, what am I doing? Like, I guess I'm playing Leviathan now because I have all the pieces. I don't know. I think that's the easiest. But with card games, I like that almost all Bandai card games come with a demo deck. So like, I got to try one. Got to try Dragon Ball and Fusion World, and now they just released a Union Arena one, and those are like fun. Obviously, all starter decks are kind of just punch, get a game done really quick. But being able to sample it, and I'm sure something we'll touch on later, like, so the introduction of online clients for Fusion World is going to be huge. How many more people will at least get their hands on virtual cards and then consider turning it into a real hobby? Yeah. I think we've sung the praise of that for most of this podcast. It's like, of course, I think more people would be into Digimon or want to be into Dragon Ball if they could touch it and do it without having to commit or go to a place.
Yeah, I think that committal part is like the hard, like the biggest thing, right? Like I've said numerous times on stream. Oh my god, not the hiccups in the middle of recording. I've said numerous times on stream that like Lorcana, the only reason I play Lorcana at this point is because I like the local community that like I play games with. It's like 6 people on a good day, and that's the only reason I play that game. Every time I think about selling out and like stopping, I'm like, something happens. I'm like, damn, I don't want to like not play with those folks. And I think that I don't think it's a bad thing to have a game where you're like, this is pretty casual, or I play at a local level. But damn, is it hard to sometimes get like people to try new things without giving them a way to test it, whether that be TTS or some kind of digital client. That's how Rick and I confirmed we were going to play Star Wars. We played a game or two on TTS. I was like, holy shit, like this is a must. Like this is easily one of the best card games I've ever played in my life. And I've played way too many card games, and I pray to God these hiccups do not stick around throughout the entirety of this recording today. But yeah.
So no, I think that's actually a good segue into we're another topic we were going to go into was Fusion Worlds client specifically, right? Because it's the newest one that's pretty much out with the new kid on the block in terms of the newest TCG or whatnot. I can say personally for me, I've enjoyed the client a lot. It's pretty much the bulk of where I've played Fusion World is online. For two reasons. Number one, I couldn't find the starter decks like anywhere. And I just haven't really had the time to like piece together like, singles online and whatever else. But also because, I think the biggest advantage to a virtual client, right, is like, yeah, we've said this before, we've got a nice core group of folks that, in the Discord and everything that we can pretty much play games with at any given moment, but sometimes you can't. Not everybody's available or schedules line up or, whatever. And it's like, well, if nobody's available, I can still just hop online and, rock a few games on the digital client. So I personally think that with Fusion World specifically, it's a great thing because I feel like their intent with that game was to get more people interested in just Dragon Ball in general as a card game, simplifying it down from the Masters version and all of that, but then giving players who maybe don't have the capabilities of getting online or have, webcams or whatever, an opportunity to play. So I think doing that type of client for any game, as we've like Agent said, we've sung these praises time and again, any card game is going to benefit from that, I think.
No, it's just freedom of the market, being able to put something in someone's hands is the likeliness of them even touching it. Though to give myself hypocrite points, the client's been out for Fusion World and I haven't touched it. I've not played a game, I haven't cracked it. I did the demo deck. And like it's weird, like not just fully sidetrack us, but stuff with like Union. I feel like Dragon Ball players are diehard Dragon Ball players, and they'll play for Dragon Ball. Where like a game like this, or like same with One Piece, where like you said, you're in. Or I wonder if Union Arena is gonna struggle from the fact that it's like, I bought this deck because I like this show, and like I hope they print stuff to keep it relevant. Or I don't know how you balance one of these anime card games. So I haven't played one like that specific.
Yeah, I think the thing with Union Arena too is like your deck is just that show or that series or IP. So like, okay, let's say I'm only here for Bleach, but you don't release another Bleach set for 5 years. Like, you know what I mean? And I think Y Schwartz, I would assume, probably has a similar problem, but they might get away with it because anime waifus, like that's the whole premise, basically. So yeah, I'm curious to see how Union Arena is gonna do when you keep in mind that like some things that hit really well in Japan may not hit really well in the West. Now, granted, the IP that they've chosen are like international, like just powerhouses: Jujutsu Kaisen, Hunter, Bleach, like Tekken. Like it will, I think it will be fine. But yeah, I don't know how you rotate like getting people to try new things from each set, because like what if there's a bunch of IP I don't really care about for like a year? I don't know how that's gonna work. My wallet will be happy though, I will say that.
I think with that is they could follow a similar pattern of any one of these other card games, right? Where like we've all seen it in any card game, you typically have like 2 or 3 like full archetypes for the most part that will come out, right? But then that archetype will stay quote unquote stagnant for a few sets or whatever. But then they'll release like 1 card or 2 cards in another set that you can add to it, and it kind of reinvigorates the deck, right? So in that regard, and I don't know if they can even do that, because like you said, if they're going to release it literally like, this first set is gonna be this block of shows, and then it's always going to just be a certain block of shows, and maybe they don't do that. But to keep it fresh, it's kind of like, okay, cool, like you're all into Bleach, and that's going to be in set 1. Maybe set 3 or 4 down the road, they don't release a whole new block, but maybe they do like a couple cards in there that you can kind of call back. So it's like it kind of keeps the deck fresh without having to like fully commit into a whole we got to revisit Bleach because it's 2 or 3 sets, or Tekken or whatever set it, whatever show it is. So I feel like they could kind of go that route, but again, I don't know, I haven't looked too much into Union Arena, so I don't know what how the flow of the game's going to go, but
I think I do fear the idea of it being like, oh, this show has been doing really well, like Jujutsu Kaisen released stuff for right now. And then like, it gets 3 to 4 seasons in, and they release more stuff for it because that show is still pumping out and it's still have a good agreement. Print a whole nother set, and then you kind of run into these situations where they're big, or are they gonna do like Yu-Gi-Oh, where they release a deck building set, which is 3 different shows, like all in one box. So it's like hopefully I like 2 out of the 3 when I go to build it. Or I know people picking it up, so you'd be like, hey, do you need your Code Geass stuff? I know no one else cares about it. I would love to grab all that, please.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's one that I haven't really followed super heavily, aside from like what sets have come out, just because I just want to know, like, okay, is there anything other IP I'm going to be interested in? Because all the ones I would be interested in have their own games, like Digimon, Dragon Ball, and One Piece. So I highly doubt you're going to get those IP. I mean, I guess you could. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't. It's all under Bandai's like banner. So I'm really curious to see if like we're gonna have how that's gonna work in terms of what's gonna be successful too over here compared to in Japan. Because they've already changed up the order of those sets, from what I recall, when they released them originally in Japan. And to your point, Frolly, there's probably gonna be a bit of a hype beast sort of like approach to like what's doing well, because that just makes sense. Like I don't know why you would push something where it's like, oh, this show just came out over here in the States and we have no idea if it's good or not, or if people like it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of considerations there.
Yeah,
well,
and
White Schwartz takes more liberty too. Like, Rascal Will Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai gets a set. Like any anime for White Schwartz for the most part gets a set. Yeah, if you're a little bit more selective, you probably pick what's going and doing well.
yeah, and that's kind of like, I mean, I wouldn't say TCG specific. I mean, you can talk about like any other like consumer product or whatever, but like you see that with anything, right? Like the moment a new anime hits the shelf, or like I remember, I didn't go and see it, but like my wife and daughter are big into anime, and when the Demon Slayer movie came out, right, and all you saw at your Hot Topics and your Spencers and all these other stores and everything was flooded with Demon Slayer stuff, and then JJK pumps out a new season, and then that's what you see. So it's like, I feel like that's what it's going to be, right? It's based off of popularity. It's based off of, like you said, what's appealing to the masses and things like that. So I'd like to think that everybody kind of has their own opinion on like how Bandai does their things and their releases and their market research and whatever else, but I'd like to think that with something as flexible as something like Union Arena, where you can literally just like Age said, you can kind of pump in any single one of the shows under their banner. I mean, I don't know how there's a way to screw it up, to be honest, because you can literally just be like, oh, this one's trending really well, let's just throw that one in the next set, and boom, there you go. So I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. And then you just make like cool little action card promo things that like just have things that people like, and you just call it good. But I think something I kind of wanted to go back to a little bit was with the online client, which I think Union Arena has like an online tutorial app, which Bandai just needs to turn all these damn tutorial apps into like things to begin with and be done. But that's neither here nor there. I think, Frolly, to your point of not having tried Fusion World yet, I think that's totally fine. Honestly, this is for anybody who hasn't tried Fusion World yet, period. And you're like, I'll just play the client. Wait, because right now there are so many things that are frustrating about it if you're not physically buying cards. Because building the decks you want, good luck with that shit. The game basically wants you to either spend money like in game or spend money on like real cards, which is the way I would recommend to go here. Like if you want to get into it, you're probably better off going like full tilt into the physical game, because at least then if something happens, you can still have value and sell those cards rather than dumping $30 into the digital client that will basically just disappear. Like, right, you will get no return on your investment whatsoever. But the way that they do their wild card system, which is basically like if you want to make a card, I don't remember what Magic calls it, but if you want to like create a card, you have to have pulled a bunch of like SRs, like 4 ofs, to even make the new card, and the chances of you doing that are very slim because you have to like basically spend a bunch of money to get what you want later. It's a very convoluted process. You also can't break down cards either. So if you have a bunch of stuff that you don't want, like it's just gonna sit in your inventory. So I say all that to say, I personally think that they will make tweaks to it as time goes on, as they release more sets, because it doesn't make sense to be 10 sets deep and then somebody can't go back to set 1 and take what they want from it. Like, that just seems stupid. So I personally am optimistic that they will change that. But again, for anybody who's like tempted to get into it, don't think that you're going to be out here building what you want day one, because the game makes that incredibly hard if you don't buy cards.
Yeah.
You know, it's unfortunate, but like, that's just kind of the place that we're in. And they also, if you have 100 code cards, get ready to type in each and every one of those codes, because they don't have like a QR code scanner thing. So you're gonna be typing all that stuff in. So just an FYI.
That's like one of the only weird things about original Dragon Ball or Master System or whatever you call it, is like someone getting their first secret, like their deck just feels like it's missing a key component. Like, I remember talking to Dragon Ball players like, I just got my first secret, and I'm like, what are you like? It's like, I'm just jamming it in. It kind of works a little bit. I gotta use it. I can have one.
Yeah.
I will say that about Fusion World. What I've liked about that, again, we're only one set deep, and the second one's coming out. But so far, from what I've seen, there are a couple. Like, we have a couple secrets. Something to note is that not every color has a secret rare yet. But the ones that are out, I mean, the art's really nice, and the card isn't definitively bad, but it's not one of those cards like in Masters where it's like, I have to absolutely, like, if I'm playing green, it has to be this SCR or whatever. Like, you can look at it and be like, cool, I'll throw it in there if I get it, but if I don't, it's not like I'm missing it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool in that sense. What I will say about this is, I think this client is basically going through what the Pokemon client went through. There's definitive pros and cons to both. I think it's a step in the right direction in the simple fact that they have a client, right? We still haven't gotten one for Masters, and Masters has been out for how long? Digimon still doesn't have an official client. So it's like, the fact that they've actually given one to Fusion World is nice. I will say that the positive, to me, a positive to it is when you're actually playing it, the imagery and the interactions and the graphics and the gameplay and the like how you select certain actions and all that kind of stuff doesn't seem like very buggy. It doesn't, with a game that has a lot of actions, you would think. So I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, the deck building system or process, like Agent said, is very convoluted, and it's very like, you don't think you're going to get there. So I think for now, this is one of those things where it's like, if you're able to get your hands on a starter deck, which is the best way to get into the game, I think just throw that card in there, you get the entire deck, and then just try it. And that way you can just kind of play it, if you don't have somebody to play with. But yeah, if you're getting on there being like, dude, I'm going to build this green deck and run the ladder and do all this or whatever, it's not happening. It's not happening. And I think I like the idea of like a crafting system. I think they just need to refine it, because in the new, I say new, it's been out for like 2 years now, but the new Pokemon client live, they have a similar crafting system, but you don't have to buy the materials to craft them. Now what you have to do to get them is just play a lot, but through you are playing and you rank up and all of that, you get rewarded with the materials you need to craft. So it does take time, but you're not actually investing anything monetarily. You just use time of playing the game, which is what they want you to do. So yeah. I think if they kind of shifted to something similar to that, would be another positive. But the client is still so young. Like I said, we're only one set in. I do see them making changes over time, especially after they hear, player feedback.
I guess if we're looking for cons, in like, that's probably one of the only glaring for any. If I do not want to pay money, I'm dedicating time to playing with a suboptimal deck, what I want to be playing. I could be grinding, I could be grabbing all my dust or whatever it is for like getting extra cards and stuff and playing and winning my free packs and doing my daily. But there is going to be a time commitment of, hey, you're playing suboptimally. Like, you just don't have it. Now, thankfully, people don't matter. Some people aren't going to have it either, but you are going to experience people who have it and are going to pop off. And you better hope that what you built at the end of it was something you wanted to do. You're going to be playing it.
Yeah, it's it's cool, and like I think the animations and like all like the presentation makes up for a lot of that stuff. You're just like, God damn, that looks really cool. Like, I'm more excited for like when they announced the new leaders to see like, oh man, what are these animations gonna look like for like their supers and like when they awaken, like that sort of stuff. Now I think that means that we're probably gonna get less leaders every format. You're gonna get like 4, which I think is fine. I don't think you need like 8 or 9 like you do in Masters, because they have to animate everything. Now granted, I'm pretty sure that a lot of those are reusing assets from Dragon Ball Heroes and Budokai, but that's neither here nor there. That's totally fine. They've been reusing those assets for decades at this point. I think that that's going to be really interesting to see what that does to kind of like the ban list for the game, right? Like, okay, if people might be playing totally differently online than they are in person, so are we going to have the same ban list online? Are they going to make two different ones? Are they going to kind of make specific game modes for the online because people just have a different kind of like take on that? It should just be interesting, and I do think that this is a great test case to bring it back to Bandai as a whole, for Bandai to be like, okay, this is what is working and isn't working, so that when they do Digimons, because I really think the Digimon 1 is on the horizon for a lot of reasons, and when they do Digimon One Piece, whatever, that they're just going to clone like the ideas and just expand upon it, because it doesn't make sense for them not to, honestly.
Yeah, just as you're talking about that, I'm kind of like visualizing like what the Digimon one could look like, right? And like your menus and your deck building and all of that, like all of those like structures can be very similar. And then when you actually get to the gameplay, when you're talking about animations and all those kind of things, it's like it's pretty obvious. Like you can literally take like animations from the show itself when they digivolve or when they like do their special or whatever. And I know there's been some Digimon games out there that, you know, they've done those kind of similar things. Because what I was going to actually say, and you kind of beat me to the punch, was that was what I felt like when I played Fusion World for the first time, and I saw the first time I saw an Awaken, the first time I saw like a special move or whatever. I'm like, I feel like I'm playing a card game version of like Budokai. Like this is insane. So I think it's really cool that they've kind of meshed like the best of both worlds with those. So I think they're, like you said, they're on the right track in terms of like how they're building these because like TCG Live, like Pokemon, I've already I mean, I hate to say this, but I've uninstalled because I can't play that client. It is so just it's so linear and it's so like vanilla. Like it's just not. There's nothing exciting about it. You know, you take a big knockout on your opponent's Pokemon, and it's just like, and then it just goes away. Like there's nothing there. You don't feel accomplished. You know, and there's no, you know. So it's like the only good thing about that is the fact that again, you can play test alone, and you can, you know, so that's cool. But if you want to play like a client that gets you excited about the game, I honestly think Fusion World's on the right track. And like you said, if they could translate that to their other properties, it's like they're going to be like light years ahead of everybody else.
I mean, I think this is like, obviously, like you guys are saying, this is the pilot program, right? Like this goes with our biggest audience, probably the best performing like IP we have. See what the numbers do, and then try to justify it for the other game. Be like, is it working? Oh, greedy do we monetary change? And also, like, I don't know how card games fall into that whole gotcha thing, but I know that like there's been some reform with like I was calling for like gotcha to be like changed, regulated, or essentially like changed. So hopefully that doesn't affect online clients as much. I feel like clients are usually better at giving you stuff. Maybe not Magic Arena, but like Pokemon, I feel like they just let you pull alt art all the time, like other stuff, which is great, right? Like it's like I can't sell this, I can't gain off it. Of course, like thank you for like increasing the odds. But yeah, like this. Hopefully, it's the pilot program, and then hopefully they find a way of like being like there should be daily rewards for like every game. But like you should be able to spend the currency like throughout like some of the game. Like, if you could find a way of being like, hey, like here's your Dragon Ball coins, One Piece, whatever, like your Digimon money, and be like, cool, it all goes to one pot, and you could potentially spend it whatever game you want. It allows people to test every game, have to play a game daily of every card game, and like you start building like stuff in other games you probably would never have done. But you still invest it into like what you're playing.
Yep.
Yeah. If you make like a hub world, since it's all their games, and you can kind of like branch out and try everything, and just share a currency. That'd be interesting. I mean, because it's all linked to like the Bandai Namco ID thing. Like they're all under the same thing. So that'd be really cool if they found some way to really just take that to the next level. I think with Digimon, kind of jumping ahead to like, you know, the unification of the timelines for Digimon. I think like when you look at Digimon Liberator, I don't know if either of you guys have looked. I haven't read any of the material. I think like chapter 0 was out. Maybe I'm tripping, but I thought there was a chapter out. But like when I watched the trailer, I was like, I can literally see how they could take a lot of these elements and make it into a client, because it looks so cool. Just the trailer that they did. For like the idea of like we're just gonna take the card game and turn it into like its own story, which to me says like they might go as far as to say, hey, it's a Steam game. Like it just really felt like, this is an interesting turn for Digimon. It reminds me of back in the 90s, what was it, 99 and 2001, when they had the original Digimon card game that actually got like a PlayStation game that you could play. It looked like and felt like that. So it should be interesting to see where they take that. And that being said, I feel like they're just waiting for the alignment to occur basically by the end of this year, going into next year, before they would even consider announcing some kind of client. Because how do you have a client and like Japan's got 3-4 sets ahead, and where we are, and like what does that mean for the client? You don't want to have your players outside of Japan playing with all the new stuff and not wanting to buy the current stuff in their region. Like it's just too much. It's too much.
Yeah, and it'd be a coding nightmare to try to be like, okay, well, if we're gonna do it while the releases are still staggered, then like this region has to be coded this certain way to only have these cards available, and then the same thing for this region and all of that. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be the smarter thing to do. So if they're already on that path of like lining us up, and then pretty much globally we're all going to be on the same set release, then it's like then having a client's basically just, can you create the client, because you're not going to have to worry about those types of elements. So
yeah.
I mean, I definitely agree on that front, and the sync up is super interesting for that, because like you said, like I'm not programming two separate things. I'd rather just have one thing that's homogenized, and we translate it from one language to another, and we have it play out. I've lost my point a little bit about like where to go with that, but the sync up as a whole, I don't want to speak for anyone here, but like the sync up for me is like probably the most interesting news for any card game we've got in a while.
Yeah.
Because like we had talked about drafts and stuff like that, where it's like you lose a lot of that experience if you aren't doing the draft thing, or like playing Digimon with rainbow rules. Like it's fun, it's really niche, it doesn't really merit a lot of things, but I think you can appreciate cards more when you have something like that. So hopefully that kind of like encourages that, or like the cooking everyone's gonna have to be doing on these lists, because you can't just look at Japan. They're like, cool, what one? Oh, green color only tournament. That's what we do. Like these things, hopefully, should feel a lot more sealed and a lot more like almost like private events when you're going to these tournaments. I think, and like there's gonna be a lot of like tech cards that I think people hold back and don't tell people about until like the lists go up.
So, it's funny that you say that. Yes, I think that with Digimon, there is no, before all this stuff comes out, this is going to be the best deck of the format. And we know because Japan plays like this. Now, granted, it's a trap 90% of the time with Digimon when people say that, right? Like, because players outside of Japan play so differently. It's just different. But, like, you won't have that conversation anymore, right? It'll be like Dragon Ball Masters, where everybody is trying to figure out, like, what's the deck? Have you really solved the deck? And I don't think that any deck in Masters really gets solved, right? There's always room for like super spicy text or whatever, or people putting their own flair on these decks. And no two lists, at least in the Dragon Ball world, are the same, right? Like I don't think I've ever seen a list where they're one for one the same. Either the side deck has some dramatic different changes, or there's like those key cards that are different. In Digimon, no, there's a lot of lists where it's like that's the exact same list. It's all about like the pilot, whether that be you net decked, which I don't think is a bad thing at all, but like you're not really encouraged to try your own thing because there's too much data about what has worked overseas for like half a year, right? So like there's no reason to really try and be different outside of, oh, my local does things slightly different, or oh, like just the meta is slightly different, so we need to change this and the third. But there isn't as much like need to really investigate and try new things and all that stuff because you've already seen somebody else do it and it either failed or it worked very well.
And to that point, I'm glad you brought all that up because I wanted to tack onto that because I know I've done it. I've looked at Japan lists of 2 or 3 sets ahead of because I want to start planning like, okay, if I'm going to build this deck, because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, in order to play this deck I have to go back and get like a card from 6 sets ago or whatever it is, but just to kind of gauge what it's going to be at. But now, like you said, with this unifying of set releases and everybody being on the same schedule and everything, but you brought up the point of Japan players play a lot different than like North American players. I wonder if that dichotomy is still going to be there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, Japan players are still going to play what they're going to play, right? Regardless of where they're at set wise, right? Now they may still they may, you know, alter certain things or whatever, but let's say for the sake of argument they keep the same way that they do, and they have a tournament or a regional on a Friday night, and we have one on a Sunday morning, and they're released. You know, it's kind of like looking at those things like, okay, are we gonna still try to go based off a Japan list? Are we gonna, as North American players, are we gonna alter what we're doing? So I'm interested to see the dynamic between, you know, Japan players and North American players now that we are on the same. If there's going to be that, oh, we're going to kind of base our list off of that, or if we're now going to have to get a lot more creative, like you said, with like Dragon Ball players, like we're just testing and trying to figure out what's going to work best. We don't have to do that Digimon right now because Japan does it, and then we just look at it and be like, okay, we're just going to kind of tweak it a little bit, and then, you know, the lists are mostly the same. So I'd be curious to see like how that affects deck building across the board, like globally for everybody.
I could actually see that being really interesting because it goes to a dedication perspective. Like, if you're trying to be competitive, like, you need to see those lists. Hopefully that also makes like every event matter just a little bit more. Like, obviously I only really care about stuff in my region unless I'm going to like Digi meta and then looking at decks that have been like going around the world or like locals or whatever. Hopefully that encourages the idea of like those who are really about it. And then also I think the spoiler scene and the investment scene are really gonna change for the spoilers. I really hope they do it just the Dragon Ball way of like, here's 2 cards, enjoy. And that gives you that magic situation right now where we're slowly learning all the cards as like they're coming, but they don't drop big stuff until near the end. And then you're going to draft that Friday as like you just learned every card by like Wednesday. And you may have read every card, but like actually getting them on the table, testing them, it's completely different. So that's going to be interesting to read a list and be like, did that work because of the region he's in, or do you let that affect your ratios? I'm like, oh, I thought like 2 was good, but this guy's running. Does that create a 12th hour switch up in a list that you resubmit to a tournament that you're in? And then investment scene, I think, is going to be really weird. I'm hoping that this really does drive a little bit more investment capital into Digimon, because right now, like, only really SRs appreciate for a bunch of stuff, and then you can have cards that are money, like Lugumon, and then like he's gone. Like, I just don't really see it anymore, and it's like its value has dropped significantly. But hopefully this makes like, did you invest in Chimeramon back in BT8? Well, good, because like he's insane money now, because we don't know what's going to be hype, and then when people start figuring out what is hype, you'll have those weird like uncommon like fluxes in price and stuff like that.
Well, it's funny that you bring up the investment thing, because I was just thinking that, right? So like, to tack onto that, like yes, but also too, you don't have like the hype trains, right? So like, you don't have like the random Shine Greymon is now $60. You're like, why is he $60? I don't understand. Which I think is a good thing, and I wouldn't say a bad thing at all simultaneously, but it's like there's a pros and a cons there, right? Of like, okay, that also means that like y'all got to be paying attention to like if you have a TCG player store or you do stuff on eBay, you really got to pay attention to like what's going on and try and like use your own prognostication to figure out like, oh damn, I think this is going to be worth something because I see a combo, I see the vision for Omnimon here that other people may not see. It also makes it so that like, kind of back to what we were saying too about like deck building, and Dan, what you were saying about like the list. Now, when a tournament happens, instead of just looking at one region, I mean, okay, it's not one when we look, but like there's a new region for us to like look at, and for everybody to trade information and figure things out as they happen, which is and just different than how it's been done. I mean, again, it's like Dragon Ball Masters now, and I think also you might get people who are much more protective of their lists, right? Because now your list is your list, right? Like you might be the only person playing that version of the deck, because like no one, unless you posted it, right? But like there was no one else, no research. I think it makes pre-release more interesting, to your point, because okay, I haven't been practicing BT17 for 6 months before it came out, right? Because now people do that shit all the time. There's nothing wrong with that, but like they basically play Japan's meta while we're in BT15. And like when you go to a pre-release or you go to these other events where people who may not be that committed, or not even committed, who don't do that because that's just not how they do things, like that person now has an advantage because you know every card in the set, you know everything that like happens, you know all the interactions, you know everything there is to know, and that can be problematic in terms of, I wouldn't say for the health of the game, but it makes it harder for people who don't want to do all that research or don't have the time to do that research to be competitive, right? Now we're all on like the same playing field. We all got to do the same amount of work to really understand what these cards do and how they interact.
And I think a good point to tack on to that too, because I've been there where I've seen, and this isn't to anybody who runs any type of online locals or anything like that, but you see it all the time when you see these like survey polls go out and they're like, hey guys, you know, I know it's, you know, BT15 meta, but anybody want to do proxies for, you know, EX6 or BT16, whatever, and everybody will vote for it because they want to try something new. And then in my mind, I'm like, why you want to? I get why you want to, but like, why would you want to play a set that still doesn't release for another 3 months, and then play it for 3 months? So then by the time the set actually comes out, you're already burnt out on it. So regardless of if you're a competitive player or a casual, you lose interest in the game because you're playing ahead of where the releases are. Like you said, there shouldn't be any need for that anymore because everybody's on the same thing. There is no, hey, Japan is, you know, 3 formats ahead of us. Let's play their format and let's try that. And then when it finally comes over to the US, nobody wants to play it because we've already been playing it for 3 months. So it's like, it's cool on a competitive like standpoint where it's like, okay, competitively it's gotten me ready and I've gotten the extra practice in. But in terms of like longevity of the game, people get burnt out because it's like, it's not fresh anymore. So I think this like alignment of Japan and the rest of the world with Digimon is hopefully going to alleviate some of that too. At least, I mean, I hope for me anyways.
That's true. I think we've been talking almost nothing but positive too about like the sync up, right? Like the only con I can see as like a judge going forward is like not having those very specific rulings from Japan where like something got clarified ahead of time. The one that got me recently was the Warp Guilmon being able to do offense trading with the special warp requirement. Like you're allowed to discount that. So like, and that card and that Vmon are the only ones that have like a specific ruling about it. So we're gonna have these weird situations where judges might make odd calls also, like if they're not fully up to date on it, or like, and some of these are just confusing, right? Like I've read a card 2 to 3 times to make sure I'm reading it properly and I'm not adding words or like missing things because you're gonna have to do that. So I wonder what unforeseen cons we potentially have. Like I'm still excited. I'm still like you talked about the investments and like I can't ride waves that I knew were going to happen anymore. Where I'm just like, oh, like this card is coming out. I'm just gonna like here's all my green stuff. Sell all my green stuff now while people are hyped, and then it dies down again. You're gonna have to be like much more up to date on it. And the only people who proxy will be those who like, oh my line got leaked pretty early. I'm gonna just like put it into my deck and see like what I can do with that. They're only gonna get like maybe 2 weeks at.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's interesting talking about like those cons, right? So I'm looking at the other thing that could be, I wouldn't even say bad, that could be rough is, okay, what's going to be, how is Special Booster 2.0 and 2.5 going to be divided? What does that do for your pull rates, for your SRs or your SCRs, your secrets, SECs? I think that's what in Digimon. Sorry, my brain's whatever. So for your secrets in Digimon, like, what does that do to your rates for alt arts? Like, what does that look like in terms of what's in those boosters and how they kind of like fit together? I think that will be, I wouldn't call it a nightmare, but I do think that like there is a chance that it could get hellish very quickly. But I think it's like, okay, but once we get through that, like we're in the promised land. So it's kind of like, we just gotta kind of, hopefully Bandai does a good job with those 2 boosters. And that like the way the rates come out and all that stuff and the lists are good, and that you don't have archetypes that get split in half unintentionally, right? Where you have like half of the cards you need for, let's say, Diaboromon in 2.0, the other half's in 2.5, but they all came out at the same time in Japan. So it just makes your deck building awkward. I think like that's a potential worry with air quotes, but I'm really hoping that like it's not going to be an issue because EX08 isn't even in the special booster. It's going to be like its own thing at least. So that just leaves, what is that, BT20, 17, no, BT20 and 19. to be in that set. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. I'm not sure how they're gonna do that.
I mean,
Because
if you go by like the very first boxes, like
Mhm.
that means 3 secrets per box, which could get kind of hairy too. Which means like secrets become the really big worry during the set. So I cut you off.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, no, I just that's like the thing where I'm like, and not to continue to play devil's advocate too, but to your point about like the judge stuff, that shit happens all the time in Dragon Ball. Now, granted, Dragon Ball Masters is one of the most complicated games I've ever played when it comes to rulings because like it's a little hairy. I think Digimon is what better placed or structured to like when you're reading stuff to be able to figure it out on your own or figure it out if you have that judge knowledge because the text isn't as confusing. But you're right. Like there's probably going to be times where they're like, hey, we need to call the head judge, whoever, and figure out how this is going to play out because we have no idea.
Yeah, I think ultimately with this, and this goes for anything that whenever there's a major, and then I would consider this a major, not even like there's just a shift or whatever, a major change or whatever. Is I think in the initial like part of it and during the interim, there's probably going to be some type of like that. There's going to be some things that people aren't too fond of. There's going to be those judge rulings like you were talking about that are going to be, oh man, we got to try to get on the same page with this and the pull rates and all that. But I think that's almost that should almost be expected. Like I feel like anybody who thinks that this whole transition is just going to be smooth and everything's going to go, without a hitch, they're like you're mistaken. Like there's going to be something. So if you can prepare yourself for that and just kind of ride the wave with it, once you finally get out on the other side of it, maybe sometime into early mid next year, which I know sounds like a long way off, but it's really not in terms of like card game releases and everything. Once that comes around, like this game I feel like is going to feel that much smoother because we're finally out of the woods and like people like we're able to do those types of, hey, this region just had a tournament and then our region's about to have a tournament. So like you can do all those kind of things. It's just going to be the beginning. That's just going to be a little bit kind of hairy, like you said.
Well, and like in cool news from like event organizing perspectives, like one of the coolest things for us this year was we were told that we're like even like my small store has the ability to apply for a regional in April. Like we could be hosting it, and like alongside that, what came right before it was we applied for Evolution Cup. Like we might be able to host an Evolution Cup, which means like official event. Like so if they're pushing that, hopefully to like what they call them, gold stores or whatever. Like I hope this means that they're like trying to push it to be like we need more events locally, and like if we're gonna be doing stuff, we might as well like also offer it in person because we have these online ones that fill up so quickly. And then it just kind of happens, or those who can't do it. Whereas like all these special events they're doing recently, like the spring break green only tournament, hoping that that's drawing more local. And they're saying like we want like hopefully have locals be able to provide a bigger experience for like more coveted prizes and stuff.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting shift. I mean, it's heading in a great direction, and I think that's why like kind of bringing it back to card games as a whole. That's why I think it's really interesting that we have so many games going on because there's something for everybody at this moment, right? Like I have never really seen outside of, I mean, growing up, it was what you play Yu-Gi-Oh, or you played Magic, or you played Pokemon, and like everything else was like a thing that existed on the shelf, but like really niche or they were weird or whatever. Now it's like everybody got a card game, and people are gravitating towards them. And I really think COVID, and not to thank COVID for everything, or for anything, but like I really think COVID had a huge impact on the hobby of trading card games in general. I think that like people really started to, give them attention. One, you had the Pokemon, the Jake Paul, Logan Paul, whoever, one of the Pauls, whatever the hell, buying up Pokemon stuff, and that really just made everybody go, oh, Pokemon card game. And then I think that like from there, like it became like a huge like a thing, and we continue to see the trickle down from that. It's just been fascinating to watch because I don't think if COVID didn't happen, honestly, I don't know. And if Pokemon didn't have that whole buyout situation where you couldn't find product, I wonder if some of these card games would be like around in the way that they are today. Like I wonder if Lorcana would be a thing. you know.
Well,
Man.
what's interesting is with that is like Digimon literally came out like peak COVID, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why still to this day the majority of our tournaments and like our events are all webcam. It's because that's how they had to be when the game first came out. So I mean, yeah, it's expanded to, you know, local shops, and like they're starting, you know, they've been doing that for a little while now. We've had some in-person regionals and all that cool stuff, but I would say a good majority of all those events are still online. You see it with Lorcana now, like, you know, some of the bigger card shops around the you know, there's one that they're going to be, they run Lorcana 1Ks all the time. Star Wars, I think, what was it? I read something somewhere that Star Wars is having a huge 1K somewhere, like in person or whatever already, and the game just came out.
It's a 5K that
5K.
PPG's doing where we were for the Dragon Ball regional.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. You guys had mentioned that. So like things like that. It's like I agree. Like I don't know where these things would have been at. You know, had things been different. I think some games might have still flourished just because, like we've said before, like I mean, Dragon Ball was a thing, you know, prior to COVID. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that would have really changed anything. But yeah, like Lorcana, Star Wars, Digimon, even like would those games have really been able to, you know, been pushed out because all the games that were still being played in these in person were, like you said, technically like the big three, right? So like people were still playing those, but when you're sitting at home with really nothing to do, it's like, I'll try this new game out, why not? And then it just over time picks up steam. So
I would love to see, because of like normally our games, like you really do like leech, like you have diehards in it, and then you have people who float from game to game, or like have a deck in a couple games. That I want to know what like the average went up from like people going from 0 card games to 1 card game. I imagine that spike is big, but I also think a lot of players have gone from 1 card game to potentially 2+ card games as well. I see that far more frequently now of those who like have a couple decks and everything, or like just dabble in like what's new and hot. So I think on average, everyone else game to game or something like that, like there's a large stuff, because I feel like I don't see people being poached so much as people being more willing to be like, oh, my friends play this, so I kind of want to get something, play with them, and then they go from there.
Yeah, I'll actually speak to that statistic actually, because again, I was a diehard Pokemon fan. I played it all the way up until like COVID happened, and then took a break from card games, but then was introduced to Digimon through my brother and played that for a while, and then Agent introduced me to Dragon Ball and got into that one, and then now we're getting into Star Wars, and I tried Lorcana a little bit. So for me, it was like the same thing. I didn't get poached from Pokemon. It's not that I don't go back to it. I don't play it as much, sure, to the competitive aspect that I used to. Even so much as Digimon. Like when Digimon first came out for the first like year and a half, I was full steam into it. But even still, it's like I play all of these games because they're available to me, right? So I don't know if anybody else can like kind of speak to that same experience, but it's like, yeah, I agree with you, Frolly. It's not so much that it's taking away from other games, rather than people just now have more games that they can play.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes, I was deep into Yu-Gi-Oh pre-COVID. I mean, for a long time, and I was like, maybe I'll get back into it. I don't know. Then like COVID happened, and I was like, you know what? Let's try something new. We'll try this Digimon game because it looks really fun. And then like since then, like I've been full tilt into card games for the past 5 years, playing all kinds of different things. But I also think that like now it's so much easier to find a community than it's ever been because of like Discords and the internet. I mean, not to sound like an old man, but like because like the internet, right? Because I remember as a kid going to like freaking Toys R Us, Books A Million, to go play Barnes and Noble, to go play freaking Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like there was finding people to play that with was a pain. You had like online simulators. Webcam wasn't really a thing. Like that's not something people did. Me and my friends tried it a few times. You had crappy webcams back then, so it just wasn't a good time. And it's just wild how much like the community element has evolved to really facilitate like trying new things and Like there's like a new ecosystem, so to speak, where like it's almost expected that like people are gonna play 2 or 3 different games. It feels like everybody I talk to, it's like, oh, I play this Digimon, Magic, and Pokemon, right? It's like I rarely talk to people who they only play one game, and those people it's usually just like Lorcana folks, and that's not in a disrespectful way, but like Lorcana folks. A lot of people I've talked to have never played a card game before, and that's their first. I fully expect them to get into more just because that's the nature of this cardboard addiction that we have. But yeah, no, it's just been fascinating to watch for sure.
Lorcana is definitely a gateway. Like for every hobby, there is a gateway to get you in. Or in Lorcana, it's like it.
Yeah, 100%. So I know
positive things.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's. I don't have like any negatives about like the amount of games that flood. Like when I first thought about it, I was like, is there? No, I don't think that there's. Other than like hitting your wallet and like if you don't have the self control to like not buy product, but like other than that, like right, like I think it's good for card games and like this hobby to kind of grow because I think there's so much potential for it and like the market as far as like people, it's. I wouldn't say infinite, but it's like as long as people are around and like entertainment and have not even just the internet, but just like are around and have disposable income, like it's a thing that somebody can get into even if it's just casually.
I will say that because like you brought up a good point. It's like, if it's a self-control thing, but like you could apply that to literally anything that people put their disposable income to, right? They could, any right. So for me, I look at it, try to be, positive over here. It's like, the community aspect, it opens up, the social aspect for a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't have it. Another big thing for I don't personally do it. I've kind of dabbled in it a little bit, but a buddy of mine is basically at a point now where he's actually left his like full-time job to like buy and sell cards and like pretty much has created his own online shop. Because of and it's not just like he was a Pokemon buddy of mine, but now you look at his shop online on TCG Player and he's got just about every card game that's on there, and it's because he doesn't know a lot like all the ones that he doesn't play, but he just knows that buying these things in bulk and understanding the market and then being able to sell them out because of how high demand that these games all are. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at it as a positive of like it's providing an alternative means of like of employment or like income for some people. You know what I mean? So yeah, the self-control aspect is definitely there, but that's anything with that goes with anything that people want. A want is discretionary. So if you can stay on top of that, which I know can be contradictory to human nature, but if you can do that, I don't really see any other negative to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny you bring that up. It's like like those who can't facilitate will facilitate and like can find the way to do it, but like nothing is a sure bet, and like things change all the time. But you're right, you could have stopped when you said COVID did a lot for hobbies, because like the amount of people who just exploded into like I need something to do in my house while I do stuff and something to be social with and talk to people with. Card games just seem to still be the medium that's like the easiest to get people into. Like I'm surprised card games still exist with video games and like everything else. Like there is just something to it. It almost has like an eternal appeal, and I'm not even sure why.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's like some of your favorite moments immortalized, and like I don't know, bro, like. With Star Wars, like for example, I got this Vader deck just chilling right here, and like it was enough to make me go, hey, I need to get in this game because my boy, hey, he looked sick, and I got to spend this $30, and then that became, probably 10 times that. So it's crazy, and a lot of times too, like for anybody who's thinking about getting into card games, also like get into it like because you're generally interested and not because you're trying to make money. And like I'm not saying that you won't make money back. It can and will happen, but like don't do it with that intent because you're just gonna drive yourself crazy. Even if you're like running a shop, don't do that to yourself, because like there's just a certain mindset I think that you kind of have to have. Like yes, you should be invest intelligently with like the best knowledge that you have, but like don't get into it. For example, I haven't even shown y'all anybody this in video yet because I didn't record when I pulled this damn card. But like, for example, if you guys like, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but so I pulled the Vegito alt art from the Dragon Ball, the latest Dragon Ball set, right? So it comes from the collector booster boxes. I bought like 8 of these boxes for like $230 a pop. And I was like, you know what? Let's just see what happens because there's a chance that we could pull something crazy. And I just love this game enough. And now like I paid for the rest of the boxes, right? So like, when you're getting into these games, like there's like an investment aspect, and sometimes that hobby can become like a job for you, and like that's great, but get into it because you want to like have fun, not because you're trying to like flip stuff, because that will frustrate the fuck out of you, aka what happened to all the people with Pokemon that got into it and then got out of it very quickly when Pokemon flooded the market with sealed product, and all that stuff is worth pennies now. So that's just a random soapbox.
No, and I think to that though, it brings up a good point of like, regardless of how you're getting into a card game, whether it's casually, competitively, collectively, as a business, whatever, just stay within your means. I mean, I feel like that's a pretty, common sense trait that a lot of people people should have, of like, you know what you're capable of, you know what you can do, and as long as you stay within that, you're never really going to be negative, because one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to pull the things, or if you're buying singles, rather, you're going to get the things that you need or that you want to play, or in this case where it's like, yeah, you might explode a little bit and get, a fair amount of product, but in that, your odds of pulling something like that'll make it back is pretty high, but you're still staying within your means, right? It's once you go outside your means and you don't make your money back, that's when you're negative, right? Because you spent more than what you were anticipating to get in. So yeah, I think that's just a general rule of thumb, regardless of what you're looking to get into a card game for. Just stay within your means, because once you do that, because the other thing too is what it's also going to do, like you said, it's going to frustrate you on an investment standpoint, but it's also going to frustrate you on a playing aspect too, right? Because then you're going to like lose your passion for wanting to play the game because you're frustrated with, your pull rates, or I just lost money on this box or whatever, and then you're not even going to want to play it. So like you like lose twice on that. So
yeah,
that would be like to tack onto his soapbox. That would be my 2 cents anyway.
I think every collection is a complex investment, right? Like if you do comic books, you do video games, anything you collect is a complex investment, because there's a monetary value, and like, will you ever part with it for that much? Will someone ever actually pay you for it for that much? It's a lot, but I feel like you're right. Going in with the sole intention of making money is usually very naive, because it's just not gonna pay out the way you want it to at the time. And then scalping also like introduces a certain thing. Because like, I don't think everything should be labeled scalping when people do invest smartly, but I can see like some shady practices getting used by people. So yeah, no, if we're trying to save people's wallets, hey man, you can just play a low rarity version of it as long as you have all of the cards. But at the same time, I'm gonna splurge on myself every now and then, get me some shiny cardboard, because that's what I like investing.
100%. Y'all know, we all, I think, are guilty of like, ooh, we got to make this deck pretty, but we only really do that with stuff that we're gonna play past a format. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Or in my case, I go and splurge because I am gonna play the deck, and then it immediately gets hit. But fine. It's fine.
It's all right. You don't, that doesn't upset you at all.
No. That's no. Not even a little bit. It's happened to me twice, but it's fine. It's fine.
We don't. It's all right. And look, guys, Dan's still here, so that's real. That's real dedication. That's real dedication.
Yeah, I haven't left yet.
See. All right, agents. We really appreciate you guys listening to our return episode with Dan. Now we are back. We're at full power again. So that feels really good. So we will see you guys within the next month. I don't know if we'll figure out what day, but we'll see you guys next month. More releases, more card game stuff to talk about. I'll let the guys close out with any closing statements. Whoever wants to take the floor first.
I'll make one. I said it before we jumped on the pod, but just to note, I think it'll be interesting. The next episode that we record will be episode 12, which will officially, if we do, if we're doing these once a month, will officially have been our 1 year of doing this podcast, which is just crazy to me. I know I missed a couple, but like the fact that this podcast as a whole and like our collaboration between the three of us has gone on that long is crazy to me. So I want to see, like, I really like to see what anybody, like, put it in the comments too, like for our quote unquote year 1 year episode, like if there's anything special or like interesting. I mean, even off topic, I wouldn't even mind getting kind of crazy with this one, and see what we can talk about. So yeah, I'd be excited for that one.
No, we're finishing off season. Like April is the time to actually go to spring, check out new things, try it all out, and like more people come back to the hobby, I feel like. So hopefully this is the start of some good competitive seasons, the season of cardboard playing.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited for the future of like our hobby across games and all of that. But yeah, guys, thank y'all for tuning in, and we will see you next month. Peace.